Welcome back, everybody, to day 2 of the Gold Club World Cup, a very unique tournament series that will be taking place throughout the entire week, where teams from China and across the globe will be competing in both Standard and Battlegrounds for a prize pool of about $100,000. My name is Gia, and joining me to bring you the first 2 rounds of actions once again is Language Hacker. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing pretty well. Schedule's been a bit difficult to change up to match the tournament, but it's been going great so far. We had a great day of action yesterday. I'm looking to a lot more today.
Yes, yesterday was quite the set of bangers from Battlegrounds to Constructed. I think you and I were really caught off guard about how they went about broadcasting Battlegrounds, because as far as the global audience is concerned, the most exposure we have to competitive Battlegrounds is through the invitationals, where we stick to just one player. But yesterday we were bouncing around many different players at once. Are you feeling a bit more ready to keep up with the action today, Hacker?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when you get caught off guard, you have to go on the fly quite a bit. But now that we know what we're up against, I think we got a good shot of getting today covered pretty well.
That's right. For anybody who's just joining us on day 2, fear not, you haven't missed all that much, but it will be the second group of players today. Group B, 4 teams, 2 from China and 2 from the global scene, will be competing in the Battlegrounds and Constructed portions. And the Gold Club World Cup in and of itself might be an unfamiliar concept, but because while we have the Masters Tour and Grandmaster system over in the global stage in China, they have the Gold system, and the most recent tournament before this was the GTC Gold Team Championship, where the top players there in Battlegrounds and Constructed actually got to qualify to this tournament, where there were invites from the international team. So of the teams involved, Hacker, which ones have impressed you so far?
So yesterday in Battlegrounds, we saw Team Liquid, we saw Team VK, LP, and FCB. I had pretty high expectations of Team Liquid going in from what I've heard in terms of Battlegrounds with the players they brought with W2I Bill and Show. But I've also heard some very good things about VK, and VK Diana yesterday showed us a very excellent back-to-back wins in the 2 lobbies that we played. So that was really impressive to see him take both lobbies. So Team VK so far has impressed me quite a bit.
Very true. I mean, as for the current standings, VK is up there with 26 points in first place, but Team Liquid is trailing not too far behind with the 23 points. And we're talking about these point systems in Battlegrounds. Can you take us over how you actually earn those points in each lobby?
Sure. So in each lobby, we have 8 players, 2 from each team, with 4 teams in total per lobby. Going from first place down to 8th place in the lobby, you will earn 9, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 points respectively. So you get a few extra points for trying to go for first place, but no matter where you rank, as long as it's a little bit higher, you'll get some more points. In contrast to the most recent Hearthstone Invitational we saw about a month ago, where players were only rewarded points for being in the top 4, now that there's an actual complete point distribution for every single placement, we might be able to see some different strategies instead of people trying to just fight for the top 4.
Yeah, and on top of that, this is also like the first major competitive Battlegrounds tournament where the new heroes are featured. Tess comes to mind, Brand Bronzebeard. I'm seeing a lot of people tweet about their Pogo Hopper Dream Comps finally being able to come to the rework to the recently released heroes. And for the bottom 2 teams of Battlegrounds, LP is not all that far behind either with the 17 points, but it's looking pretty rough for FC Barcelona, I have to say, with only a total of 8 points. And we saw that from their roster and Constructed and Battlegrounds, they actually have a huge overlap with both Zim and Blizes playing in both of the formats there. I got the chance to talk to some other French players, and I heard that Zim and Blizes were actually a bit late to pick up Battlegrounds compared to maybe the rest of the field, especially since the Chinese players have been at it for a long time. Who do you think are the Chinese players to watch out for in PG?
If we're talking about today, I've heard very good things about Team WE, and specifically Nightwalk. I've heard he's praised as, I've even heard he's one of the best players, if not the best player in the world right now, with some of the strategies he's come out with, and also APM, which is kind of funny when we're talking about Hearthstone because APM doesn't pop up too much. But in Battlegrounds, it can really matter when you're trying to do transitions, pirate builds, etc. So Nightwalk is the main person I'm looking out for from what I've heard.
Yeah, and for anybody who follows Battlegrounds on personal streams, and there's a lot of great content to be found out there. I would notice a lot of streamers use a certain exploit where you can actually disconnect during the game to come back with a little extra time on your clock when you need to do those difficult transit. Note that for this tournament, that is absolutely forbidden, not allowed, and also no communication between the team members is allowed either. So in a lobby of 8, even though you have one ally, you're not allowed to directly tell them, oh, level this turn, let's both place our boards in the weakest way possible so we take the least damage. The most they can do to tip each other off is the in-game emotes.
Yeah, without being able to discuss each other, like discuss the upcoming plays and stuff, it'll be a lot more interesting to see how these players play. And I think we saw a little bit yesterday, some teams were trying to fix their positioning when they know they were against their opponent without even being able to discuss kind of how strong they were, just trying to make the board a little weaker. So even if they do, beat their teammate, it would at least do a bit less damage.
Yes. And while I talked about at the beginning, the prize pool is about 690,000 yuan, which translates to a roughly 100,000 US dollars. The top team taking away 300,000 yuan, I believe, which is roughly $40,000. It is, I have to say, I don't think primarily the money that's on the line for these teams. I think there's a lot of going on. We got the chance to watch the intro video leading up to this tournament. We saw a lot of good luck greetings. We saw a lot of the saying that we're going to take this home. Chinese Hearthstone is where it's at. Do you think that this is the time for the Chinese players to prove that they have what it takes on the global stage, Hacker?
Definitely. I mean, from the teams and players we've been seeing so far yesterday and what we're going to see today, and for the rest of the week, I imagine there's going to be a very strong showing. I spoke already. VK was winning the Battleground standing so far, at least after day one. Team IG dominated yesterday and constructed as well. And I mean, the international teams are struggling. It's only been one day, but we'll see if that continues to happen.
Yeah, the pattern is already a little bit telling. And honestly, it's been a long time coming, even though last year VK Lion managed to take an incredible historic win both for women and for China. I think that prior to that, the Chinese region was maybe not taken the most seriously compared to, say, EU and Americas at the time, not really having anyone to win the highest level of Hearthstone before. But I think that it's been a long time coming that it's now that they're improving, they're performing really well at the Masters Tours. And a lot of that is thanks to the gold system, which has led to tons of qualifications. If we look at particularly Lion's path to get to the global finals last year in the first place, she had to win tournament after tournament in many, many huge circuits. Do you think that the Grandmaster system in particular is kind of like, say, a bit of a disadvantage, Hacker, because you maybe have less incentive to play in the bigger tournaments?
To some extent, yes. I feel like it's still important to go to Master Tours to kind of sharpen your blade and stay sharp, but it does feel like the Chinese circuits are quite a bit more extreme and difficult to go through.
And we do see our lovely hosts there. They have a very nice comfy couch, but of course we have to make do with what we have across the world to bring you this broadcast in English. And the teams for today were also very conveniently shown. Yesterday, while we did mention that we heard from VK, from Liquid, from IG, today we will be getting to see from the international side T1 and G2. Also two very strong and storied teams. From T1, there's 6-0 on that roster, possibly one of the best international Battlegrounds players. Who's standing out for you in G2, Hacker?
Well, for G2, we have Tice and Simi playing. Tice, I have seen play a little bit of Battlegrounds, but normally I tune in for Constructed, at least on his stream, so I'm curious to see how much he has to bring to the table. I know he's still a very strong player in Constructed as well as in BG, but I'm curious to see how Simi does. I think she's a stand-in for the G2 roster, so I'm not quite sure how much experience she has in Battlegrounds, and I'm curious to see if I'll be pleasantly surprised today with her performance.
I would definitely hope for that as well, because I think we were also not really sure what to expect from Team FCB yesterday, even though I was saying that they were a bit late to pick up Battlegrounds. I'm sure they've been putting a lot of work in to learn it with the limited time that they had compared to some of the other players. So I would expect that Simi's been putting that time in as well. And over in the constructed side, we also have Team Lucky Future and Team World Elite in the Chinese side. And Team LF in particular, I think that's a name I've been hearing for many, many years now. Any name there in particular that stands out to you, Hacker?
I've seen Yue Wing, I think, perform in some of the HCT tournaments, and I remember being kind of impressed with how he was performing. I believe he may have been at, I shouldn't probably say the exact tournament because I might get that wrong. I'll have to double check and get back to you guys on that. But I remember seeing him play, and I was pretty impressed. The other players don't stand out to me as much, but I also haven't been too familiar with the Chinese scene, so maybe I'll be seeing more of them today if we don't get another clean sweep from some of the Chinese players.
Yeah, lots of stuff to look forward to, both in Constructed and Battlegrounds. Personally, though, for Battlegrounds, I really, really am excited to see Team World Elite step up. And honestly, in their particular player, Nightwalk, we were talking about how even Tice, I think, in the preliminary interviews was saying he recognized that that's one of the names to look out for. And looking at the results from the previous tournament, the Gold Team Championship, where World Elite actually qualified into this tournament by placing second in the total Battleground scores, second only to Team Liquid, I believe. So they're actually the top ranking Chinese tournament team for Battlegrounds in the previous tournament, followed by VK. And if Diana's results are speaking at all, I think World Elite could even give him a run for his money.
Definitely. I'm very excited to see the lobbies today. And we're going to be seeing 2 Battlegrounds lobbies today with the 4 teams we just talked about. But it's important to note that over the next 4 days, we'll also be seeing an extra 4 lobbies with the same 4 team groups that we saw yesterday and today. So the players will still have a few more games to be able to increase their standings if they have the strength to do so.
All right, so I think we've set the stage quite a bit for the Battlegrounds. So let's talk about Battlegrounds itself. For anybody who's not too familiar, I'm sure the majority of people who tune into Hearthstone Esports, whether it be on YouTube or on Twitch, would be expecting to see Constructed a majority of the time. When Battlegrounds first came out towards the tail end of last year, what was your first impression of it, Hacker?
It was pretty exciting. I mean, the announcement was at BlizzCon. I don't think I saw it coming. I don't think many people saw it coming. Maybe we knew that something was kind of in the works, but we didn't quite know what. And when it came out, I remember watching a bunch of people at the convention testing it out and playing it for us. And I remember it just being crazy cool. It's kind of like the hype of a new expansion, but it's more than just an expansion. It's an entire new game mode, which we haven't really had for quite a long time outside of Tavern Brawl, which has been constantly kind of worked at. But it's been pretty exciting. It plays quite a bit different from Constructed while still maintaining some of the cards that we're kind of familiar with.
Yeah, the auto battler genre in and of itself is new to esports, and particularly Battlegrounds, I think, as somebody who played regular Hearthstone very, very faithfully for a long time, and very little arena, very little Tavern Brawl. I was just so shocked about how easily I was sucked into that new game mode. So for anybody who has not picked up Battlegrounds yet, I recommend you try it. It is absolutely free to start if you already have Hearthstone downloaded, and there are plenty of streamers that put out content there from day to day. As for the skill sets though, Hacker, would you say that any of your expertise as a Constructed player carries over to how well you perform in Battlegrounds?
To some extent, yes. There's still a level of game sense where you, over a large period of time, obviously not off the get-go, you'll be able to learn at various points throughout the game how strong you are, what you kind of need to go, what lines you need to take to be able to not necessarily win the game, because it is ranked from 1st to 8th place in the lobby, but how to kind of perform as best as you can. Some talents don't quite translate as well, and there's some talents that you need that you might not have in normal Constructed. And I brought this up a little bit earlier, having APM, which stands for actions per minute, basically how fast you can do some stuff. Some builds require you to make a lot of actions very quickly, run through the shop, try to buy a lot of minions, play them, sell them, and it can be very difficult with a specific set of time allotted per turn. Now, that's not every build, but there are some skill edges to be gained if you can pull out some crazy moves like that.
That's right. And you talk about build called compositions. In Battlegrounds, if you're only familiar with constructed, sometimes you give a glance to the tribes that you might find at the bottom of a card, say demon, beast, dragon, murloc. That's oftentimes not super important in constructed unless for very specific decks, but in Battlegrounds it is central to how you play the game. There are 6 tribes available currently in the meta. That's beast, demon, dragon, murloc, mech, and pirate, and in every single lobby there will be one of those banned away. So you essentially have 5 at the very least directions to go into for comps. There are also some general comps you can go for that don't necessarily just rely on one type of these tribes, but also a combination. There's cards that rely on a menagerie strategy that we were talking about a while ago. And of those comps, Hacker, do you have a favorite one that you like to build towards?
Murlocs are just really fun. I found that minion type really kind of cute. It stemmed from World of Warcraft, which I guess all of Hearthstone did, but Murlocs specifically I found hilarious in game, and I'm glad that they kind of brought it here. But with Murlocs, you can do a lot of battle cry balancing, just like in Constructed. There are minions with battle cry where when you play them, you buff minions. Some cards you might recognize are Cold Light Seer, one of the 3-mana 2/3 Murloc card that when you play, it buffs the health of all your other Murlocs. That still works the same way in Battlegrounds. So eventually, one of the late game compositions you can make is having a board full of Murlocs and just scrolling through the shop trying to buy everything that buffs them, that gives them more attack, that gives them more health. You can maybe give them Divine Shield, Poisonous, and I found that to be kind of fun to bounce around with.
Yeah, although I have to say of Battlegrounds viewers, at least on Twitch, might disagree with you, Hacker. I'm pretty sure a lot of people have a bad reputation for Murlocs at this point because it is generally one of the most powerful comps. If you can get it towards the late game, it is very, very difficult to counter the Murlocs once you get that ideal Gentle Megasaur adapts, like you mentioned. Personally, I'm a big fan of a comp that is not really viable too much anymore, which is the Goldrin Beasts. Prior to the most recent balance patch, the card Goldrin, the Great Wolf, was pretty much the centerpiece of the entire comp, and you can get it at 1 tavern tier earlier, and you can have Baron and the Macaws and just build even little tiny tabby cats into forces to be reckoned with if you had those pieces put together. Now that beasts are not entirely strong, I would say that after Murlocs, it's pretty much dragons that you want to be going for. But do you think that the most recent patch has actually allowed more or less flexibility for final builds?
I feel like in the most recent patch, the meta is a little aggressive, and by that I mean you can start taking a lot of damage very quickly, and unless you have a very early spike into one of the build-defining minions, such as Caligos that you need for dragons, or Nadina, or perhaps Brand Bronzebeard that lets you balance battle cries more often, if you don't hit one of the big minions, you're kind of struggling to find an endgame comp, and in that terms, it's early on, you have some more flexibility because you can kind of pick any minion that pops up that makes you stronger. But I feel you have to kind of pigeonhole yourself and find a build-defining minion that lets you go a specific route. And after you find that build-defining minion, it's very difficult and complicated to kind of switch away from that if you realize that that composition isn't good in your lobby based on what other people are playing as well.
That's right. And we get to see just how cool the setup of the GCWC set is all the way from China. They have lovely casters, and I just love seeing how the team logos are emphasized so much. I feel like over in the Masters Tour and Grandmaster scene, we don't really emphasize the importance of teams so much, Hacker. Do you think that plays a little bit more into your prep work in this type of tournament?
I think it definitely does. I mean, I think most players in the international scene still have practice groups, whether or not they're part of the same team as them. But I feel like having a team can help a lot more and give you a bit of more structure and kind of trust in between each other to talk about strategies, improve together, etc.
Yeah, I have to say from my limited experience in playing tournaments that practice groups are of the utmost importance. If you just play on ladder by yourself, a lot of times you can get tunnel visioned on what you think is the best strategy, and you can completely overlook a deck that might be the bring for that particular tournament. And we're talking about brings even though we're starting off with Battlegrounds, because later on we will touch into the constructed unexpected portion of the tournament, which is a whole beast in and of itself, because each of the teams has to bring the full 10 classes, a deck list for each of them, and then enter into a very complicated ban phase. Can you run us through how that works exactly?
Sure. Like you said, each team will submit 10 deck lists, and the ban phase is a three-part phase. In the first phase, each team will ban one of their opponent's classes. They will share this information to see what was banned. They will then ban 2 more classes. Again, they will share and see what was banned, and then they will ban a 4th class, share. And after these 4 classes have been banned, they will have 6 classes left to choose from, and they will fight in a best of 5, which means that they only have to win 3 games with their remaining 6 decks. And it is last year's standings, so that whatever deck they choose to queue with and win has to keep being played until they lose with it or until they win the set.
That's right. You and I were discussing a lot yesterday that we expected to see Demon Hunter and perhaps Warrior, and maybe for 3rd and 4th classes Hunter, almost universally banned across each and every team. But in the series that I was actually casting with Nai, there was FC Barcelona leaving up Demon Hunter from their opponent. And I believe one other class that was also very unexpected for me to see. Do you have any insight as to why they might leave that up?
Well, in a format like this where you have to bring all 10 decks, it's kind of scary, or let me say dangerous, to try to target something like we have normally seen in Conquest, because last year's standing, it doesn't work like that. If they lose with the deck, they'll be able to switch to something else. So what teams might be trying to do is group together a bunch of classes that only have one viable archetype, or that what they believe people only bring one archetype of. For example, in Demon Hunter, Control Demon Hunter is gaining a bit of popularity, but I think most people are still on Tempo Demon Hunter as the bring for most tournaments. So if you can group that together with maybe Hunter and maybe another aggressive deck, you can try to formulate a strategy that all of your decks try to cover their bases with that specific archetype. So it doesn't really matter what else they bring. If you can try to beat 3 or 4 other decks with most of your decks, then maybe you can get an advantage. Maybe that's what the teams had in mind when they left Demon Hunter open and Hunter as well. Maybe they thought all of their decks, or most of them, were able to cover those bases well enough.
Yeah, that would be a very bold strategy, and I hate to be results-oriented, but I would end up only praising it if it really worked out. But finally, we have the game action starting. Of course, it is Battlegrounds for today. Surrender and Sixo representing T1, and we have Valera and SYU for Team SN. We're going to be going to switch to the other 4 players quite soon, so quick opinions on these heroes.
Eudora, very good pick, and I already missed the other one. Zixo, it looked like he was trying to decide between his 4 options. Kael'thas, a very good pick. Nosdormu, Daryl, all very strong units, strong heroes. Alex Straza is a bit of a riskier pick, but depending on what else Sparkling was offered, that may have been the best available option.
Keep your eyes on Nightwalk, guys. This is the player to watch as far as our limited knowledge of the Chinese scene goes, but he is one of the biggest Battleground streamers out there, and also has drawn the respect of some of the other players. I believe Tice was saying in his preliminary interview that he is keeping his eye on Nightwalk. We have a Beast Band lobby. Do you have any idea of the implications for that, especially since there's a Deathwing in here?
Deathwing can do a little stronger with beasts. There are some beasts such as Rat Pack, Infested Wolf, minions that spawn more minions that work very well with Deathwing's hero power, which provide all minions on the battlefield with 2 extra attack. That being said, if Deathwing doesn't find a Rat Pack, it can be pretty bad for everyone else. So with beasts out of the lobby, I think Deathwing can have kind of a safer route if he wants to go something like mechs. And I mean, he's not limited only to mechs. He can switch to something else if he just finds the right units for it. With Beast Comp being an out, like you said, Goldrune, one of your favorite comps, is going to be difficult to go. It's already kind of difficult in the first place, so I don't think that'll impact too many flexibility options in the lobby.
That is right. For Surrender on the Eudora, we see him buying a minion and digging there instead of leveling, which is pretty much the standard curve for Eudora these days. You want to get that hero power online every single turn, so by 6 gold, you get your first golden minion, and can also level up to 3, so you can discover into Tavern 4. And Gold Grubber is the premium outcome, which is why Eudora is considered probably the strongest hero in Battlegrounds at the moment.
Yeah, one of the main ways to get a power spike is to get a triple. When you get 3 of the same minion, it upgrades to a golden minion. And what that means is that the gold minion has twice the stats of what the normal minions had, but on top of that, it also gives you a reward where you get to discover a minion from a tavern tier higher. As you tavern tier up, you get higher and higher quality minions. So getting a high quality minion faster can help you be stronger than your opponents.
Indeed. For Nightwalk, he's on Dancing Daryl, which has one of the passive hero powers, so you can't actually pay any coins to activate it. But if you sell a minion on Daryl, it spawns 2 hats that give +1/+1 randomly to the minions in Bob's Tavern. Previously, Dancing Daryl was quite a strong hero, but I have to say in the recent meta, it has fallen in power level. Do you have any insight as to why that is, Hacker?
So one of the main benefits of Daryl, when mechs used to be a lot more popular, is that you could buff minions with Divine Shield. Now, when you buff a normal minion with +1/+1, it's just +1/+1 of stats. But when you buff out a Divine Shield minion, that can attack twice. Once for the Divine Shield to pop, and another time after that. So it's almost like you're getting 2 buffs out of the hat. Divine Shield comps have kind of fallen off a little bit, and there's still some powerful minions that you can dance on, but a lot of late game strategies end up outscaling these early strats that Daryl goes for. So even though he does still relatively well and can probably get top 4 consistently, it's harder for him to get the first place or second place in the lobby.
Well, we move to Surrender on his first dig completed. Picks up a card that gives buff, but unfortunately has nothing to buff. I don't think he can afford to get too greedy, though I like that he plays it right away to get the 4-drop Discover, but nothing too great here, honestly.
2 of these are Battlecry minions, which generally help if you have the minions that they synergize with, but Surrender didn't really have that, so he opted for the 3rd option, which while is weak by itself, the Ripsnarl Captain, it can buff your other pirates quite a bit, so he might be looking to pick up some pirates to temporarily make himself stronger until he can find something else to work with.
Yep. Unfortunately, though, in Battlegrounds, if you have less minions than your opponent when the turn starts, you are guaranteed to attack second, so there is a chance that the pirate could have gotten sniped before it even attacks here. Surrender is still going to take a little bit of damage, but now that he has that Ripsnarl you're talking about, even tier 1 minions like the Scallywag can be very, very helpful to him from this point. But Valera here on the test, one of the newer heroes added into Battlegrounds, could have some very interesting strategies coming up if he faces his ally in SYU. You can feed the test good minions depending on the knowledge of what their comp wants to be.
Yeah, definitely. It'll be difficult to communicate that without being able to talk, but you can still definitely try to feed your opponent, your teammates a good minion. We've seen this in some other tournaments where I think players have tried feeding Brand, for example, to Rafam, where Rafam steals the first minion from your opponent's board that dies every turn. So giving your opponent a very powerful minion can help them kind of scale as well.
And over here on Radu for the Kael'thas, he actually went for a not standard curve, I believe, leveling to 3. A turn earlier, I think most heroes tend to level to 3 on the 7 gold turn, and that's why you see that he has not as wide as a board that you might expect, but he has 3 3-star minions already. Particularly the Yoho or Ogre is what he's relying on to take the win and hopefully buff up his Hangry Dragon.
Yep, there's a general curve that you can follow where you buy a minion, then you level, then you buy 2 minions, then you buy 2 minions, and then you level and buy. But you can kind of stray away from this curve if the minions you're offered are very poor, or if you think you're strong enough that you can just level up a tavern tier to try to get access to higher quality minions faster, even though you might be losing that round and taking damage as a result of not making your board stronger immediately.
As for Simi on the Nosdarmu, a bit more of a consistent hero, allows you essentially an extra roll every turn to make sure that you get at least decent minions in the early game. We saw that she had a Shifter Xerath in hand, and that is definitely the biggest X Factor card in the early game. It does cost quite some tempo to buy it earlier on, but if you can high roll it into an early 5-star minion, 6-star minion, it can give you a comp on its own. But Sparkling now, with the Alexstrasza levels to 5 very early, you definitely want to do that so we can get the 2 Dragon Discovers. I'm definitely looking at the Herald of Flame here, but that's because I don't know what his previous comp that he faced was.
Yep, Murazan gives you a random minion from your opponent's last warband, or last board, I guess you can call it. So the Murazan here gives him an extra minion on top of the Herald of Flame. Herald of Flame is a bit of a stronger unit, even though the stats are just a little bit better. It has a nice effect that when it overkills a minion, it will deal 3 damage to the leftmost minion on your opponent's board. But I think with his board being smaller, he wanted the Murazan to kind of add a bit more strength instead of just picking the stronger unit.
That's true. It just gives him one extra minion to play down. Economy-wise, that helps a lot. And you'll be hearing a lot from Battlegrounds casters and streamers what economy is. It's generally making sure that you have extra gold so you don't miss any good minions that you want to buy immediately on that same turn. Because the difference between freezing and buying a minion on the following turn is huge, because you essentially miss a free roll that occurs at the start of every turn.
Yep, every turn the shop is refreshed naturally, and Bob will offer you a fresh set of minions based on what your tavern tier is. But if you can freeze a board and say, I want these minions to show up next turn, but by doing that, you give up the free refresh that Bob can offer.
Simi's Xerath has turned into a Cobalt Scalebane, probably an above-average outcome. Her comp does not seem to have a particular direction yet. I could see this becoming Menagerie, but she doesn't quite have the luxury of leveling to 5 quite yet. So I think Simi is just looking for a triple on the Stewards of Time, primarily.
Did Zixo already die?
Did he? The Maleficent? I didn't even notice. Oh my goodness.
We're a little... It's a little rare, not super rare, but still uncommon for people to die before they get to 10 gold. I think this was turn 7? Zixo must have been offered a lot of very unpowerful, weak minions for him not to be able to make it this far. That's really rough.
Maleficent is a hero that gives all mechs in Bob's Tavern +1/+1, and so it can actually become a useless hero power if you don't run into mechs in the first place. Particularly Deflectobot is what you really want to hit as Maleficent, but that does quite hurt for Zixo. I think from that little recap there, we saw that he did end up taking the lethal damage from SN Valera on the tests, so I would be very scared to see what's on the test board.
Yeah, definitely. We can see it right now. It does look... Oh, you know what might have happened? With Valera having Peggle, yeah. I'm not sure if that popped in this turn or if it was the previous turn. It looks like Valera did get a triple Deflectobot, which may have allowed him to discover Nat Peggle from Tavern Tier 5.
And the Peggle, when it overkills a minion, summons a chest that summons a random golden minion. And a lot of the times you can get a little bit scammed if the chest summons a minion that summons other minions, like Gas Coiler or the Boat. And that can take you another extra, I don't know how much damage that you don't
Surrender just finished another dig, and he got a South Sea Captain after having a board full of pirates already.
Second Ripsnarl also available. Okay. Looking great for him here, has the chance to find Eliza, doesn't get it, but the Tide Razor does synergize with his board somewhat.
The Tide Razor is what we would refer to as the Boat.
Indeed.
So an interesting thing about pirates, they can kind of become a lot more powerful. They can become very powerful quickly, but it's hard to scale them past a certain point. There's not as many Battlecry minions that can buff your existing minions in the pirate minion type as there are in some other minion types. So what Surrender can do with pirates is try to knock out other people in the lobby faster, or try to find some very specific pirates that will help him actually scale a little bit.
Yes, it's a bit unfortunate for Surrender in that we refer to pirates as not often a first place comp. It can be easily top 4, especially if you knock out the greedier players in the mid game. But because Surrender has seen his teammate Sixo already get 8th place, I'm sure he's feeling some pressure to try and go for a first place win. But after you have so many resources expended into a pirate board, I don't think he can get all too greedy at the moment. For Valera, though, he has the golden cannon to go along with that golden Deflectobot. It's already looking like he's a couple grubbers away from success.
Yeah, definitely. Having a gold grubber is a minion that scales based on how many golden minions you have on your board. So without having to play any Battlecry minions or anything like that, it will just naturally scale every single turn. And minions like that tend to be powerful if you can maybe not make builds around them, but have just ways to scale it without you having to invest more money into them.
Indeed. It's going to be a tie between this Kael'thas and Valera. And over on Simi's side, it's looking like she's about to meet her end as well. The tempo-heavy pirate build, as we said, can deal so much extra damage in the mid-game if you're caught off guard. And it really sucks to die with a Xerath in hand, not knowing quite what it could have given you, but that is going to be G2 and T1 down a team member, so already not looking that great for the international.
Sparkling hit something a little bit uncommon. A golden Murzon, that was incredible as well. Golden Murzon. So Murzon gives you a minion from your opponent's last warband or the board. But a golden Murzon, when you upgrade it and get 3 of them, gives you a golden minion. So not only do you get to discover triple from the tavern tier above yourself when you play the Murazon, but you get to another discover once you play the minion you get off of Murazon.
And that gave him so much more consistency to hit that Kalagos that he was really looking for. He already had the Nadina, which oftentimes you want to get that after the Kalagos because the scaling comes first, and then you want to scale as much as possible before you add the Divine Shields for the cherry on top. But still not a problem whatsoever for here. I think as soon as he's able to get the scaling done, it's going to be a very, very powerful comp. Hard to beat, especially since I'm not seeing anyone on Murlocs at the moment.
Yeah. Not a lot of Murlocs right now. We see Nightwalk doing some Daryl stuff. And this is kind of what we're talking about. Getting a buff minion like this is very beneficial early, but will eventually fall off because once you have purchased the minion, there aren't that many Battlecry minions that buff mechs too much, and then mechs are generally associated with Divine Shields. So Nightwalk can make himself more powerful, but to be able to contest something like a late-game Dragon comp, like we see the Alex Straws in the lobby doing, it might be difficult to be able to get that first place.
Appears that I spoke too soon about there not being any Murlocs. It already looks like RDU is investing at least part of his board into the Murloc comp. It's going to be a bit difficult to win this particular fight, I think, because all of his minions are at a relatively low health total, whereas the Deathwing has so many token spawners. But if RDU can survive for a little bit longer, start hitting for Gurgles, maybe he can put something together for a win. For Nightwalk, though, on the Daryl, we saw him stay on Tavern 3, which is a common thing to do on Daryl, but not many other heroes, because you generally just play for top 4 by buffing a few select Divine Shield minions, as you said. But that
RDU barely
like
staying
1
alive.
HP. Yeah. Wow. Okay, over on Nightwalk, he's found another minion to dance on, as we call it on Daryl. The general strategy here is to buy every minion first except the one you want to buff, so that you can isolate the one for Daryl's hero power and then sell off all those extra minions. A lot of the time, though, it's a bit awkward for Daryl to end up loading some gold or not ending with the full 7 minion board, which is, as we said, if you have more minions on board, you get to attack first, and if you have the same amount of minions as your opponent, it becomes a coin flip.
And Golem being not the best minion to dance on, but the reason it's being danced on here is that with the Deflectobots, they regain Divine Shield after it's lost if another mech is spawned on your side of the board. The Harvest Golem spawns another mech minion, which when it dies after the Deflectobots get a hit off, will refresh their Divine Shields, making them able to attack an extra time without dying.
Yep. Valera also on kind of a mech-ish build, kind of Divine Shield as well. I would like to call this a scam build because he has Pagel and 2 Shredders, so those are a lot of random variables, which depending on what they spawn can make or break his next combat. But for Surrender, covers another tier 6, but still hasn't hit that Eliza that I think he's been looking for quite some time
Pagel.
now. Yeah, Golden Pagel, also scam friendly.
His chest spawns 2 golden minions.
Yep. A lot of potential for disaster here, but we're gonna see how that fight goes because Surrender has a very good chance of knocking RDU out.
Yeah, Murlocs can be strong, but it takes a long time to get to the point where you are able to buff their health and adapt them as much as you can. And it looks like RDU did not have the chance to be able to adapt the full board of Murlocs or buff them too much, so he just has a couple to help him get by with what he looked like he had a half mech build available as well for him.
Right, and over here we can see that Surrender does deal the lethal damage. He's at the healthiest life total, but it's gonna be difficult for him from here to outscale dragons, especially since the dragon player already has the Nadina. So for Surrender, what do you think is the best way to go from here?
It's kind of difficult to scale, and the later we go on without trying to find Captain Hagar or an Eliza or some way to make your board better, you're going to have to try to find some tech cards or minions that can help you beat some of that late game build. And what I mean by that is something like an Unstable Ghoul, for example, that when it dies, it deals 1 damage to all minions on the board. So against the board that might have Divine Shields, like after the Dragon Comp's Nadina dies, it provides all the dragons Divine Shield. That might be a way to be able to beat them before they outscale you. That being said, if you're not scaling your minions yourself, even with the Divine Shields being popped, if their minions are bigger than yours, then it doesn't really matter because you're going to get run over anyways.
And for Sparkling, we can see that scaling in action. he has the choice of whether he wants to sell 2 of these minions to get yet another battle cry for this turn. He has a second Nadina in hand, which is kind of an insurance policy against even Murloc builds. If you have 2 resets of Divine Shields on your dragon, sometimes they can get there. No more Murlocs in the lobby that I'm aware of, so I think that Sparkling is an easy favorite to take this lobby unless Surrender can get those tech cards online like you were talking about.
Definitely, I completely agree with you. And for scaling out, I'm not sure if we touched on this. Kaligos, one of the Tavern Tier 6 minions, is a 4/12 dragon that reads, whenever you play a Battlecry minion, buff all dragons on your side of the board by +1/+1. So over the course of several turns, if you just keep picking up Battlecry minions and playing them, even if the Battlecry minions themselves don't do anything to your board, the fact that it is a Battlecry minion will slowly start building your minions up stronger and stronger.
Right, and we keep talking about scaling, and oftentimes minions that individually scale are very powerful, like Gold Grubber and Wrathweaver, but Kaligos is one of those few carry cards that let you scale an entire board, and we can see by doing some quick maths that there was probably 11 or 12 battle cries already played by Sparkling, and it's only gonna keep getting bigger because as long as he's not taking damage, he doesn't need to worry about getting countered by poison.
I think that Nightwalk's board was actually strong enough to beat Surrender's, but Surrender's Pagel spawned 2 chests. And I think with 2 chests, it's going to be too much for Nightwalk, and he won't be able to win this round, which means that Surrender will be able to knock him out.
Yeah, Surrender had a very powerful start going into this, and I think he's a shoo-in for top 2. It's really just a question of how the dragon can... or how can he beat the dragons? And you know what? If you don't have scaling options, as pirates often run into a dead end if you haven't gotten the Looter plus Hogger combo, I think it's a very valid strategy to rely on these Pagels and boats to summon you something that wasn't originally on your board.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, being able to understand what the limitations of your composition compared to the compositions of your opponent is very important, because you'll understand when you need to take risks, such as putting perhaps on average weaker minions, but minions that have some more high payoff potential. For example, in that Pagel, Sneed's Old Shredder, Boat's just a good unit anyways, but even Boat, for example, could give you some sort of scam if Boat spawns you a Pagel, that spawns you a chest, that spawns you another Boat, etc.
Well, Surrender has picked up a brand now. There's a Megasaur in the tavern. He already played his Amalgam, but he's at a life total where he knows he's never dying straight up. So he could think about picking up some pieces for Murloc transitions. Already selling a captain there, I think Surrender's thinking far ahead into the future. Not necessarily about his immediate opponent in the Deathwing, but how can he beat the dragons later on.
Right. One of the natural predators of the dragons are full late-game Murlocs, and what that means is late-game Murlocs, generally you want them to be adapted by Gentle Megasaurs, so they have Divine Shield, and you want to be able to apply Poisonous to all of them. And Poisonous Divine Shield minions are very, very strong, because it doesn't matter how much your health your opponent has on their minions. If Poisonous will just kill it no matter what. So a late-game Murloc transition could be Brand to double your battle cries, try to spawn a bunch of Murlocs, adapt them a couple of times with Megasaurs, and that may be able to win you the game, even though you might have had something completely different 1 or 2 turns earlier on your side of the board.
He did get a little flip-floppy though, because since he discovered Eliza, he then backtracked and sold the Amalgam to go full on to Pirates, and this could be Surrender saying as long as he secures top 2, that's a pretty good result in and of itself. And yeah, the Eliza putting in a lot of work alongside the Rip Snarl captains. Pirates, I really love the design on them because it really just makes you imagine of a bunch of pirates storming a boat every single time they get to attack. The momentum keeps rising, but if they run into one big wall at the beginning, that can make the entire comp crumble.
Yeah, it's definitely pretty cool. Kind of fits it does kind of tell a story. I think the reason for Surrender picking up the Eliza here is that he realizes he needs a lot more pieces than what he currently has available to be able to make a full Murloc transition, and he might still have 1 or 2 turns after this round. I think he thought it was more important to make sure that he can knock out SYU on the Deathwing and guarantee at least 2nd place, and then he can start worrying about trying to beat Surrender. Oh, sorry, about beating Sparkling.
Meanwhile, for Sparkling, though, he had that turn facing off against the Ghost, which you do if there's an odd number of players left in the tavern. And previously, when we watched him, he had 2 Nadinas, which kind of signals the end of the comp, right? Because you also want to have 1 free space there to keep buffing the dragon. So he actually sold one of the Nadinas to further his scaling, making sure that he doesn't get overrun by the pirates, because to Sparkling's knowledge, he doesn't know if Surrender maybe picked up a gold grubber in the meantime and could have had something larger than his hangry dragon. So the scaling continues, and he'll probably hope to pick up the second Nadina a bit later after some more rolls.
Yep, I think Surrender's eyeing this Seabreaker Goliath. If this Goliath gets an overkill on minions, it buffs all pirates on your side of the board by +2/+2. Unfortunately, it's a little late in the game for that to consistently go off, especially when he knows he's going to be up against Sparkling's dragons. On the left side of the battlefield, you can see every single hero in the game, and if you mouse over them, it'll tell you what the minion type that's most prevalent on the board will be. So Surrender will know that Sparkling has dragons, and Sparkling will know that Surrender has pirates.
Right. And when you're facing off against pirates, you generally want to make sure that your first line of defense is very resilient. So Divine Shield Poisonous is absolutely disastrous for any pirate start, because it's guaranteed to take down 2 minions. And with pirates, every single time you get to attack, the scaling is multiplied. And we can already see that the Nadina going off is spelling doom for Surrender. I'm not quite sure if this is lethal damage, but with the Caligos very likely to stick, and also the Anilan maybe, that could be close to lethal.
Yeah. And this is what we're talking about. Surrender had a very powerful mid-game build, but against some of these late-game scaling comps, it's quite difficult to actually surpass them as pirates.
Surrender left with 10 HP on his last legs. I don't think he has the economy to actually make a good transition. So I think the best he can do is possibly set up a taunt to make the Nadina not die at first impact. And then, I don't know, maybe get some amalgams.
Some scamming has to happen. I'm not sure how,
really
but something has to happen.
Well, I see a boat.
Boat is an option, for sure. Amalgam's not bad either. You could try to get Divine Shield Poisonous on it. It adapts once for every unique minion type you have on your board. Unfortunately, even if it does get Divine Shield Poisonous, it's at most going to take out 2 minions, maybe even only 1, because of Nadina providing Divine Shield for the rest of the board.
And the Hogger arriving far too late for Surrender. That definitely hurts to see, but top 2 is no small feat in and of itself. So he's still going to take the Primal Fin there and try and get a Tox Fin on this, perhaps. Not enough time for a real Murloc transition. So I think Surrender knows that it's over. And yet again, we could be seeing a lobby where it is a Chinese player taking first place. Not Nightwalk, which we kept on hyping him up, but actually Sparkling has the highest MMR of the Chinese players currently at 14.6 thousand.
Yeah. Nightwalk's still doing very well. Like we said, Daryl's pretty consistent at being able to get top 4. Generally, you don't want to be Tavern tiering up too fast. You want to take advantage of your hero power. And we see him in 4th place at Tavern tier 3 without access to super high quality minions, but still being able to find something that he can buff and secure top 4 with. And that paired with what's likely going to be Sparkling's win here, with Pagel being knocked out, I think this is going to be a guaranteed win now for Sparkling. W is looking very strong after the first lobby.
Yeah. 14 points right off the bat, 9 from Sparkling and 5 from Nightwalk, I believe. Yep. For Surrender, that is a very strong showing, but because 6-0 finished last, I'm not quite sure if T1 will be up there, though. I'm worried about G2, I have to say, because CMA was finishing in 7th place, and her teammate also not managing to make top 4.
Yeah, kind of a rough start, similar to what we saw yesterday with FC Barcelona having quite a bit of a struggle at the start. Now, it is important to note that in a lobby, sometimes Bob just doesn't offer you the minions you need. Sometimes your opponent may get something crazy off of a boat that you weren't expecting, and you end up taking a lot more damage. So this could just be kind of a one-off for G2. We'll see if they can bring it back in the second lobby.
Yeah, I have to say already we're seeing stark differences between the lobbies here in the GCWC compared to invitationals. Again, because the point distribution is a lot more level and it's not weighted so heavily towards getting top four or even first place. And so we're seeing a lot less people go for Murlocs, whereas previously you might see people go only for Murlocs, which is known as if you can get the absolute nuts with it, it's nearly unstoppable. If you were to play in this tournament, Hacker, would you go into this with a mindset of I should not get greedy?
It depends how much I trust my teammate. If I think we can both
Okay.
play very consistently, then I think we should lean towards heroes such as Kilthos, Daryl, stuff that we know would be very good at consistently getting top four, which is generally on ladder what you want to do to climb ranks. And being rewarded for getting top four, top three, even fifth place gets points. Trying to just go for a more consistent route instead of trying to go for a high variance, super late game, Murloc thing, it can be a little bit riskier. It can still work out if the pieces kind of align and you're offered what you need, but I think it would be much better to go for a more consistent route.
Speaking of consistent, it is actually both the Chinese teams who are on top right now. SN with the 10 points, managing to have a total higher than T1's because of 6, so it was untimely demise at the early game there. But G2, it's looking really rough for them. RDU, perhaps known as also one of the best Battlegrounds players, constantly streaming it, even though he's also putting a lot of work into Constructed. They really need to turn it around in this next lobby because each day it's just 2 lobbies per group.
Yeah, definitely. 6 lobbies overall does sound like a lot, but after 1 or 2 days, you're only going to have a couple more chances to be able to try and fix the standings in your favor. Kind of a rough start for the international teams over the past 2 days, at least for Battlegrounds. We'll see if the Chinese continue to dominate. As we've kind of expected from what we've heard, I think a lot of the Chinese teams are very, very strong in Battlegrounds.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at this list of MMR here, I think the majority of them are 13K and above. It seems like if you're at 11K, you're a scrub in China. Looking at you, Trunks, but I can't throw any trap there because I myself am just at 10K MMR. Overall, I'm very impressed with what we've been seeing, but as you did mention, it is still 6 lobbies total, so that's why we have an entire week of broadcasts. This is only day 2 of 7, and what we're seeing today is only 4 teams out of 8 for Battlegrounds, so lots of content to be had, guys, and you should tune in every single day. Any predictions for the second lobby, Hacker?
I mean, just not to go results oriented, but WE, strong performance, which is kind of what we expected, or at least we kind of hope to see an incredible performance for them, securing 1st and 4th place there. I wouldn't be surprised to see it again. With the heroes offered, you can kind of go for different strategies like we talked about if you want to try to go for something consistent or something a bit more, let's say, high rolly. We saw Alexstrasza, for example, in that game, and Alexstrasza is not necessarily the pinnacle of consistency. What you want to do on Alexstrasza, for example, is Tavern tier up quickly without making your board stronger, because at Tavern tier 5 you're rewarded with 2 dragons that you can discover, and you can discover something like Caligos, which can completely start scaling your board really quickly. But if you get something really underwhelming offered, you end up being a little bit weaker than you otherwise would have, even though you're now at Tavern tier 5. So it's going to be interesting to see what heroes they end up choosing now that they are in a bit of a lead. Perhaps they want to take a more risky line, or if they want to go a bit more consistent.
I think a player that picks Alexstrasza or Flurgle definitely exerts dominance over the rest of the lobby. It's a lot of confidence to be said from the hero choices. Do you have any particular favorite heroes that you tend to favor, even though the stats might not necessarily put them as the best, Hacker?
You brought up that people don't like Murlocs that much. They're fun to, I want to say that they're fun to play with, but frustrating to play against when they get a crazy massive board that you can't really overcome. But Flurgle, I think, is kind of fun because it kind of, you can play them a little bit differently than Murlocs would normally be played as. You generally want to be able to Tavern tier up to 5, where you want to find something like Brand Bronzebeard and a lot of the other big Murloc buffs on 5, or build-defining Murlocs that you can get there. That being said, with Flurgle, you can stay on Tavern tier 3 quite a lot and just sell Murlocs, which gives you more Murlocs available in the shop. And there's a couple of smaller Murloc buffs on Tavern tier 3 where you can just try to consistently bounce those and make yourself very powerful early game, which you can then Tavern tier up behind that to get the more powerful stuff like Gentle Megasaur on 6.
That's right. In Battlegrounds, there are a wide variety of heroes. My last count was 40 plus of them, and the different heroes, some of them are not leaning towards a particular tribe, such as Kael'thas. It just has general buffs depending on the order that you buy things. But a lot of heroes are lending themselves to a particular tribe. You mentioned Flurgle for Murlocs, there's Jiraxis for demons, Patches for pirates, and so on and so forth. But it doesn't mean that as soon as you pick a hero from the get-go that you're locked into those tribes. I've had definitely top 1 comps with Flurgle on pirates or something. And so you have to adapt very much to what Bob gives you in the tavern. Yes, you will be inclined to go for what your hero offers, but I think the real mark of a good Battlegrounds player is knowing when to deviate from the script.
Definitely. It's a big amalgamation of decisions that you're making over the course of 13, 14, 15 turns. Every single roll is a decision. Do I need any of these minions over the next turn? Can I use them for a composition that I can switch into later? Or do I want to spend more gold to make myself stronger now? Do I want to tavern tier up to get higher quality minions? Can I afford to take a hit this round if I do that? There's a lot of micro decisions and macro decisions that are made every single turn by these players. And going back to the heroes that lend themselves to a specific minion type, one of those is Maleficent Mana Storm, which we did see 6-0 pick up. And I out of the minion type specific heroes, Maleficent is not one of the strongest, but it's kind of generally consistent if you just want to go for a top 4 sort of mech comp, if that's what is offered up to you. So I imagine 6-0 didn't have, you know, wonderful hero options to choose from, and going Maleficent can kind of pigeonhole you into trying to go mechs. And if you're not offered mechs and you're not offered other strong minions, it can be difficult to stick it out in the lobby until you are offered something a bit more appropriate for what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I can hardly even think of that many heroes that I would pick Maleficent before, so I have to imagine that was quite some unfortunate outcome for 6-0 there. So far, including yesterday's lobbies, I think out of 3 top 1 comps, we saw 2 comps and the 1 Murloc. Of course, the 2 wins yesterday being taken by VK Diana. I am very excited to see a different comp take the top, though. Particularly, I think pirates have that potential. We haven't seen any big APM pirate builds just yet, or any huge sudden transition into Murlocs. I guess it's less common now that Hooktusk it has been nerfed to not be so consistent with the Murloc builds. Is there any composition that you want to see on top for this next lobby?
I want to see mechs. Mechs are difficult. Okay. So mechs and pirates, one thing they have, a similarity that they have is that they can be very strong mid-game. And even though they can scale a little bit, they won't scale as much as other late game comps. So the way for mechs or pirates to win a lobby is for basically everyone else to not be able to hit their super late game comps. Or, for example, dragons aren't included in the lobby, or Murlocs aren't included in the lobby. And then we get to see some comps that don't always shine as much because they generally finish 4th or 3rd place, but they do have the potential to finish 1st with the right tools in the right lobby.
Mm-hmm. We have been seeing a fair few beast bans in these lobbies, but I don't think we've had one where demons have been banned yet, and that's actually surprising to me that we haven't seen any big demon comp, because I feel that that's also a pretty consistent way to get top 4 if you just go for the Wrath Weavers and the Floating Watchers, especially since it's not something that people tend to fight over in the pool of minions. Battlegrounds, there's actually, you don't see it on screen, but there's a limited amount of copies for each minion on each tavern tier, and the higher the tavern tier, the fewer copies of the minions that are available. So you might find that if there's a lot of people going for Murloc comps, you're not going to find your Bran, Bagurgle, Primal Fin as often. And Demons is a comp that I think a lot of people tend to gloss over, but it can be very powerful in the early game. So I'm hoping to see some Demon action for this upcoming one.
Yeah, definitely. There's also ways you can kind of sneakily pick up minions to make comps like that scale a bit better into the late game. And what I mean by that is when you have big demons, with the big demon comp with Wrath Weavers, with Floating Watchers, like you said, even sometimes with Gold Grubbers, if you get a lot of golden minions, something like Poisonous Murlocs can kind of shut that down, because even the smallest 1/1 Murloc that has Poisonous can knock your Wrath Weaver down, even if it's a 74/74. And a way you can try to play around that is picking up Selfless heroes, getting an upgraded Selfless hero, which is a Tavern Tier 1 minion, 2/1 Death Rattle, give a friendly minion Divine Shield, give a random friendly minion Divine Shield. And if you get an upgraded Selfless hero along with your big demons, now you suddenly have a 74/74 with Divine Shield. So now you have some protection against Murlocs. You also have protection against another big demon comp or another pirates, because a Divine Shield on anything completely killing a minion is incredibly powerful if they don't have access to Divine Shield as well.
That's right. We've talked a lot about Battlegrounds, and I have to imagine it's really, really difficult to imagine what's going on if you haven't tried it for yourself. So I highly recommend you guys, if you have Hearthstone and Constructed downloaded, you just have to go to modes and try Battlegrounds for the first time. If you get the Tavern Pass, you can also have the full access to all 4 hero choices at the beginning and try it for yourselves, because the game is actually technically still in beta, but I expect to see great things from the future of this, especially since with the roadmap that was announced for the year of 2020, we expect to see continuous changes to Battlegrounds, balance patches that even outnumber Constructed in frequency, I have to say. Hacker, do you feel that the changes to Battlegrounds have been coming quick enough, or do you want to see even more frequent changes to the heroes and the minions?
I like having some freshness in the meta, and I think that the team has been doing a very good job of pumping out these balance patches, doing hero reworks, offering new heroes up, and I think that they're at a very good frequency right now. I think if they come up a bit too frequent now, you'd be kind of lost in terms of, all right, how many things are changing? I'm already, hopping in the game and saying, oh, I forgot how it has changed, So I think they're at a good pace right now. I think too slow and it might be a little boring after a few months, but I think they have a very good system set up now.
Indeed, and we're getting into the next lobby. Super excited because I see a patches from WE Sparkling, the first place from the previous lobby. That's already, signaling to me that we're looking at some APM pirate potential. But for Radu, we also have to note that he is on Maiev, one of the most powerful heroes. And one thing it took me very long to learn is that hero power on 1 as Maiev is actually completely valid, possibly even superior to buying a minion straight up. Thoughts?
So what Maiev's hero power does is you choose a minion in Bob's Tavern and it remains dormant for 2 turns. On the second turn, you basically get it at that point. So you're paying 1 gold to get a minion in 2 turns, whereas you could normally pay 3 gold to pick up a minion now. And it also gains a +1/+1 buff. So to lose the first round or 2, I think is fine, just to make yourself much, much stronger on turn 3, 4, etc. I think is definitely a good way to take it.
But I can also understand if Radu doesn't prefer to do that, because there are specific minions who would rather buff with Maiev, the ones that can keep scaling later on. In particular, the 2-3 to 3-4 buff, I would say, is much more significant than a 1-2 into a 2-3. But we also saw Millhouse in this lobby, which is perhaps one of my favorite heroes, because the economy plays completely different. You buy and sell minions. You buy minions for 2 gold, and they still sell for 1. But the problem is your refreshes cost 2 gold, and it's a hero where you're forced to make do with what Bob gives you on the very first few rolls, because you don't want to waste that value looking for anything in particular.
Yeah, for sure. Another interesting thing about Maiev is the fact that you can pick up a lot of pairs and try to set yourself up for triples, because you're, in air quotes, buying 2 minions a turn, where you can buy 1 for 3 gold and hero power to save it for later. And on a lower tavern tier, when the amount of different minions is smaller, the available pool of minions is smaller than as you tavern tier up, it's easier to get pairs and triples, so that when you do choose to tavern tier up, you can get higher quality minions from your awarded triples.
Is right. And SN Valera there, you saw him holding on to one of his whelps because he was faced up against the Kael'thas, which was his teammate in SYU, and unfortunately didn't get the better 2 of the options to steal as Rafam. You definitely want the token generator for better economy, which is why we see from Rafam that they don't tend to level on the 4 gold turn. They go for a bit of a different curve to just completely fill the board early on and give yourself the best chance of getting triples. But now that RDU is facing that Rafam, you see him put the Tabby Cat ahead of the Alley Cat and try to make sure that whatever gets stolen, if he has any control, will be less valuable minion.
Oh, Valera on Rafam, the red whelp sniped one of RDU's red whelps, which means that that will be a triple now for Valera.
Huge, getting a triple this early, and that might incentivize Valera to go for his level now. But the patches for WE Sparkling, not really leaning into Pirates immediately. On the 6 gold turn, I'm sure he would have rather have seen the South Captain or the Free-Dealing Gambler. Great ones to synergize with the hero power, but as long as he's able to get an early Salty Looter, I think the time you really want to start hero powering with patches is when you hit the 3 stars, because you can get some very impactful minions there.
Yeah, definitely. The Tavern Tier 3 Pirates are kind of build making. If you get the Salty Looter, for example, it can definitely scale quite a bit. I want to also point out that Valera there, very unconventional board for a Fom on this turn. He has 3 dragons, one's upgraded, and he picked a Xeris from the reward. So that could really pay off incredibly if it turns into a very powerful minion.
Indeed, and Sixo's first dig facing onto Simi on the Bran here, not really going for the special Bran strategy you can sometimes do if you're offered a lot of Battlecry minions early, is you can stick on the early game and go for a Murloc start instead of leveling, but since that was not available, I think it's perfectly fine for her to just go for the standard curve here.
Yep, picking up a Murloc pair. Unfortunately, mechs are out, so we won't be able to see a mech Bran build this time.
Oh, no pogos.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
For Sparkling, he has a full board and full health as Patches. I am super excited for Patches.
Yeah.
I mean, let the bias show. If he goes into 3 stars, finds an early salty looter, and doesn't take that much damage, a lot of the time you do end up having to level to 5 for the pirate build because you want to get around 2 Captain Hoggers to actually have that super efficient economy to just buy and sell pirates and get your salty looters nice and big.
Yeah, what Captain Hogger does is when you purchase a pirate for 3 gold as the normal price, or 2 gold as Millhouse, you get 1 gold back after the purchase. So with multiple Captain Hoggers on the board, every pirate purchase costs 3. You get 2 gold back if you have 2 Hoggers. You sell it, and you make another gold. So every pirate to pick up is basically free. So pairing that with a salty looter that gains stats for every pirate you play, that turns into an APM build where you try to pick up as many pirates as fast as possible and buff your salty looter. That being said, it can be susceptible to something like a poisonous Murloc. I spoke earlier, a 1/1 Murloc can take down a 40/40 salty looter with the poisonous affix.
Yes, the wise man once said, even a 1/1 Murloc can take down the giant pirate.
I'm gonna write that one down.
I guess we could be getting a little carried away though, because in the meantime, building up to that, it's a bit difficult for pirates to sustain. We already see the Patches taking a bit of damage there from not a very strong comp, I have to say. So while leading up into the salty looter builds, he really wants to be picking up the Rip Snarl Captains and even Salty Captain to make the board a bit more resilient. As for the From though, he actually picks up an interesting option with the Xeris, which is Synergy, but a card that loses its value pretty quickly, I have to say.
Yep, Togwaggle grows for every dragon that gets a kill in each round, but it resets back to 1/2 at the end of the turn. So it can help scale quite a little bit if you have a lot of dragons, but it will eventually fall off because it doesn't naturally scale outside of the round.
It's most powerful when the red whelps can actually still snipe minions, but after those minions have upwards of 7 health, it's very difficult to do so, and then the Tog can get sniped. But for SYU, he actually has a pretty cool synergy available, can pick up the N'Zoth and the Macaw here, and essentially have 2 spawns of N'Zoth because he doesn't have any other Death Rattle minions to mess with what the Macaw will trigger. This looks like the beginnings of a possible Menagerie comp as well, because he has both Beast and Dragon synergy coming around.
Yeah, the SYU has a couple of options. Like you said, depending on whether he gets Bran, Baron Riven there, Goldrin if he starts Taventuring up, he can take this comp in many different ways.
And that's generally what KLFS does in the mid game, is you can take any decently statted minion and turn it into an overstatted minion because of the hero power, and you can ride that early tempo and convert it into well-timed Tavern tier up, and then you can start looking manually for the 5-star minion carries. So I completely expect SYU to keep his options open for the near future. But Sixo on the Eudora on last place has to feel very, very bad.
This is very rough for Sixo. He did have a decent start. The golden minion he got from his hero power wasn't incredibly useful, but the Discover minion he ended up getting, Savannah Hyman, was actually pretty strong for that point in the game. Unfortunately, I think he's probably been having some bad matchups because he's still taking losses after that. Perhaps he hasn't been able to find much more. Hopefully he'll be able to turn around once he gets the second dig and finds perhaps a Tavern tier 6 minion. If he ends up going that far, he might choose to stay on a lower Tavern tier because he's taking so much damage instead.
Although it does make a huge difference if you can discover a Tavern tier 6 minion. There are a lot of good tempo options there. Gas Coiler and the boat can be enough to carry your comp for 1 or 2 rounds before you actually choose a direction. RDU here with the Wrathweavers. That's making me happy because I did want to see some Wrathweaver action. And this is a card that damages your own hero for 1 every time you play a demon, but it gets +2/+2 for that effort. We also see the Golden Vulgar Homunculus, which is super painful to play. I wouldn't be surprised if Radu's not actually been losing that many combats, but because of these demons, that's why he's at such a low health total.
Yep, the whole way you leverage Wrathweavers is using your health as a resource, basically sacrificing life to give your minions more stats, which ends up being really good. But it, again, important to note that it has a kind of cap on how much you can scale that, because you only have 40 health.
Yeah,
you should really know this.
40 to begin with, but
it's 40. Okay.
It's really tough though when you don't hit the Mal'Ganis later on to keep scaling, because you do hit that cap as you mentioned, but there's also a give and take, because there's also another minion that tends to fit in this comp, which is the Floating Watcher, a demon on 4 stars that also gets +2/+2 every time you get damaged. And if you have Mal'Ganis to protect your health total a little bit more, that means the Floating Watchers can't scale. So it's really a matter of knowing when to turn the page as this type of demon comp. For Radu though, he does get a Siege Breaker here, another tempo option that will keep his Wrathweavers growing.
Yep.
And he's looking for Bran, even though we don't see her on screen. That's a very useful graphic. So I guess she is partially on Murlocs at the very least.
She had a couple of war leaders, I believe, last time we checked in, and she is Bran, so on Bran looking for Bran fits the theme.
Finding yourself in Hearthstone. Well, 6-0 has he was in last place, but now he has picked up a Mama Bear. That can be a comp-defining card, at least for the mid to late game. I wouldn't say it's an end game card, but he can easily turn this Rat Pack in the shop into a powerhouse right now.
Yep. Every minion you play after Mama Bear is on the field, every beast you play gains +5/+5 permanently.
Go ahead.
And that lets you kind of scale with, to some extent, instead of playing Battlecry minions, every beast you play is kind of like a Battlecry because it buffs itself. Eventually that kind of falls off because your board will end up being full, but there's still ways you can kind of take advantage of this by, for example, tripling a minion. Every time you play an individual minion and a copy of it, they will both get a buff, and if you triple it and play the golden copy, it also gains the buff. So there is ways to scale, but eventually the Mama Bear will end up losing usefulness.
In the first iteration of Battlegrounds, Mama Bear was an endgame comp, but nowadays it is filling that role that you mentioned. And another beast I think that you really want to hit with Mama Bear on board is the Cave Hydra cleave effects, or the effects that allow you to hit 3 minions at once depending on where the minion attacked, are very useful in Battlegrounds. If your opponent is a bit careless with their positioning, it's so easy to catch them off guard every now and then. 6 takes a much needed win there. Surrender was his teammate though, so not feeling super ideal, but I think Surrender is still at a pretty good health total with the Soul Juggler comp, another one that's kind of good in the mid game but falls off towards the end.
I want to point out Nightwalk has 2 Khadgars in hand.
Yeah.
As Millhouse. So with Millhouse, it's difficult to be able to get a lot of rolls in to find specific cards that you need. But without Nightwalk having a great direction with his board, he might be looking to pick up a couple of token generators. Khadgar doubles all summoning effects, so that includes playing something like a Murloc Tidehunter or an Alley Cat that spawns a token. That token will spawn twice as much with a Khadgar, 4 times as much with 2 Khadgars, which means you can get triples just by playing token generators.
Yeah, they do stack with Khadgars, but Khadgar transitions are what Nightwalk is particularly known for in that board, though he had the option to pick up a second crowd favorite, which is another great strategy with Millhouse, because you can just kind of keep spam buying things. But Simi has picked up the golden Cold Light Seer and into a great 5-drop for her, has found the Bran. I think Simi, last time we checked on her, it didn't look so great, but now she's looking like the favorite in this lobby.
Yeah, she has a lot of health to work with. Even if she happens to take a loss or two, she might still have health to be able to find what she's looking for past this. But she's already, for this point in the game, is quite strong. As you can see, these Murlocs are much larger than what we see on her opponent's side of the field with Kael'thas, and this is kind of the benefit of having Bran doubles your battle cries, and Murlocs where you can buff your entire board at once. What a Cold Light Seer normally does for 1 Murloc is give it +2 health. But if you're buffing 5 Murlocs twice because of Bran, every single battle cry you play can be plus 10 health, it can be plus 10. The numbers really get out of control pretty crazily.
Right, and out of all the tribes, Murlocs have the most entire board buff effect. So aside from the Cold Light Sphere, you see her Felfin Navigator in hand, and then the 2 Bagurgles she discovered on board. And once you hit that 5-star mark, which she is now leveled to, no surprise there, is going to be able to find the Primal Fins to give her even more consistency. She has 3 pairs, sorry. And that's a lot of chance to discover into the all-important Megasaur on tier 6. And once you hit the Divine Shield, Poisonous, or even at this point of the game, just a Divine Shield, it's going to be huge. But, we're seeing
Nightwalk found Bran, and he has the Alley Cat with the double Khadgar. This is allowing him to summon... So, Bran doubles your battle cries, which means Alley Cat will summon 2 times the tokens. With 2 more Khadgars, it's another ×2 ×2. So you're getting 8 tokens for every minion you play, which means you start generating a lot of money. But on top of that, more importantly, you get to discover a lot of 6-drops. So this allows Nightwalk to find potentially game-defining minions. It is a little late in the game, so he might be looking for more tempo options now instead of trying to find something like Megasaur.
Yeah, it's really tough with Millhouse because he's looking for more alley cats to use with this Mama Bear, and after you get the triples on these, you can easily go up to 30-30 in stats. Didn't find it, but I have to say that was so impressive from Nightwalk. We heard that he's particularly known for doing these quick transitions and Bran Khadgar shenanigans even without the disconnect exploit. We see he even has time to spare after that super complex turn. He didn't end up getting what he really wanted, but I have to say I'm still impressed.
Yeah, definitely. It looks like he's trying to make a sort of mad dash for a comp switch because he didn't really have a powerful comp to begin with, and he realized that he was kind of low on health, and this was the turn he needed to try and find something. So even though he doesn't have a cohesive strategy here, maybe the double Khadgar spawning extra pirates from the boat or extra demons for the Imp Mama might give him enough oomph to kind of survive an extra couple rounds.
That's right. There is still a lot of scam potential here, but it all depends on what he summons. Very lackluster demons and pirates so far, but there's still a second boat and some more Mama spawns possible.
Whoa.
There's some Eliza. There's a Pagel. That is what Nightwalk was looking for.
Pagel, I think, even with Pagel not getting an overkill in here, I think Nightwalk will be able to take this this round over Valera on the Rafam.
Could even be lethal damage. There's Mama Bear and Eliza sticking only 14. We'll have to see.
Depending on what gets killed here from the Amalgadon. I think this is lethal damage. 2 Void Lords.
GG. Oh my goodness. Walk with the tempo options. Still has the double Khadgar available, and the Mama Bear was on that board, so he can still look for alley cats and build a transition off of this. However, that does mean that Hessen Valera has been knocked out now.
Yep, down to 6 players in the lobby. A little late in the game at this point, so it's still kind of impressive that 6 players are in. Generally, we see people dropping off quite a bit more if they're not able to latch on to a sort of composition that can kind of get them through the mid-game.
I looked away for 2 seconds and Nightwalk already spent all his gold. This guy moves very quickly. As for Surrender, though, isolated that Hydra on a previous turn, it looks like, and now he's going for the big dance turn to create a very big cleave. However, he doesn't have that many minions he actually wants to sell. He could sell another and still pick up 2 minions after a refresh, I think. Oh, sorry, it won't be enough. 1 minion after a refresh.
No, I think he can sell 1 more. If he wants to sell 1 more here, he can take up the Hydra and 2 more on the following.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Nothing too great on that option, but he does pick up a triple Soul Juggler after the second refresh. It's so big for his board space issues.
Let's find a Battle Master, an extra demon. He's down a minion, so he will not be able to attack first. But we'll see if the Hydra's enough to be able to deal with RDU's board. It is going to get a lot of damage in, depending on what it gets hit here. It can maybe kill 3 minions.
Over on the other side, it looks like Simi's first attack, double Wind Fury, sniping a Khadgar, will mean that there's no type or no possibility for shenanigans from Nightwalk this time. I think Simi is very unlikely to lose a combat from this point, so it's just making sure that she can close it out and find that Megasaur.
Yep, definitely. The things
Nice
she might have to look
tie,
out for is someone else trying to go for Murloc transition, understanding that they will not be able to win the lobby without Murlocs. So she might be looking to find the, like we talked about, gentle Megasaur, making sure she has the late game Divine Shield to protect against something like Poisonous.
Surrender. Looking at this Bolvar, I have to presume, because he has stayed on the 4 stars as a typical thing for Daryl to do. Doesn't end up taking it and just goes for some board buffs with the demons, which I think makes some sense, especially since he's got this Battle Master, which gains health equal to how much damage you've taken so far. And it tends to be a very durable minion, but it doesn't really hit hard until it gets further buffs. Has the option for triple Imprisoner though, but it's not necessarily a minion that you want to triple when you have the jugglers, because you actually end up getting less totals to benefit off of.
I think at this point in the game, Daryl's kind of strength is falling off, so I think Surrender was trying to look for something a bit more, something with a little more substance, because in top 4 now already, he's going to be facing stuff like Murloc builds. We can see Sixo also has a full, relatively full beast composition as well. He might not be certain that the board he has is strong enough against what's left, so he might be trying to find something a bit more powerful.
Well, they are facing off against each other, these two teammates, so I'm curious if Sixo with these last few seconds is going to rearrange, put his Mama Bear in front maybe, if he feels that Surrender is weaker than him. But I don't think there's any positioning here that can help Surrender escape from this.
I think all positioning is going to be very, very poor for Surrender.
But Simi, her next victim appears to be the Valera. I still don't really see... Actually, never mind. That Wrath Beaver is pretty big, depending on if it gets good value trades.
I think that's RDU, actually.
Oh, yeah. Teammate as well. 2 team fights.
Yeah.
So actually the 4 remaining players are both from G2 and T1.
So the international team's, you know, pulling up their boots and getting some stuff done this round.
Yeah, definitely love to see it, because the Chinese players have been every single win so far. I'm glad to see signs of life from the rest of the world. But Simi
Surrender managed to stay alive.
Yeah, that is huge. But even with the 2-on-1 here, ganging up against Simi, it's really going to be tough if she finds a Megasaur, though.
Yeah.
She hasn't just yet.
Important to note that she still doesn't have Poisonous. In some cases, it's irrelevant, because if your Murlocs are large enough, in theory, if they get, let's say, as big as 100, it doesn't matter if they have Poisonous, they're killing anything anyways. But they could theoretically be outscaled here if Sixo happens to find something like Goldrin with Baron. I don't think Sixo is going to be going that way. He might just be trying to pick up more Poisonous minions to be able to kill the Murlocs. But I think Simi still has a bit of a ways to go before she can solidify first place.
And I keep thinking there could be some very fun things you can do here when you know you're in a 2-on-1 situation and your opponent has Murlocs. One of you will have faced her in the near past, so there will be knowledge that maybe they don't have Divine Shield yet. They're still looking for Megasaur, and you can end up picking up Megasaurs just to deprive them in the pool, even though it's not actually good for your comp. But I haven't seen any of the players have Megasaur for an option just yet. I do think that Simi's board will easily outscale Surrenders, though. It looks like it's going to be on Sixo to try and take this for T1.
Yep, definitely. And this is where something like tech cards can end up coming in. My Exna itself is a tap into your minion. It's a 2/8 Poisonous Beast that is technically a tech card. Poisonous is something you don't want in every single matchup and not against every single opponent. Against mechs, for example, the Divine Shield will prevent the Poisonous from taking effect, so it might not be as useful. But against Murlocs, which is exactly what Sixo's up against, it's something that he does want.
Ooh, that hit of Sixo's last remaining Poisonous onto Simi's high health minion is huge. It does mean he will take the win in this lobby, but he knows that if she finds Megasaur, this comp is not going to hold up. I wonder if Sixo is going to try and steal some Megasaurs away or look for a different way to go about this, but it looks like Surrender, having beaten the Ghost, will be next to face Simi.
I think Surrender's board will not line up as well against Simi's board, as we saw.
Megasaur!
With Bran Bronzebeard, that ends up being pretty strong.
And
she's playing the Primal Fin Lookout.
Yeah. Okay, I don't think anybody's board will be able to hold up against this anymore, unless the Megasaur gives all of the worst options possible.
Megasaur can whiff. So the adapts that the Megasaur can provide are +3 health, +3 attack, +1/+1, Divine Shield, Death Rattle, summon 2 1/1 plants, and I believe Poisonous, and Wind Fury, and Taunt.
Okay,
there's a lot.
Thanks, Mr. Hacker. There's also can't be targeted in stealth if you're playing Constructed Wild mode. But anyway, even the ones that aren't ideal, such as Divine Shield and Poisonous, are very relevant when your opponent has limited scaling they can do. Even just continuous health buffs is still relevant, and that's why you see Simi still picking up Cold Light Seers, and she's just looking at the ideal order, which Murlocs does she actually want to end the board on, and a little bit left time on the clock here, so as long as she gets the Megasaur in...
She might not have enough time. She does find Poisonous.
Is there time to find the Divine Shield?
That's what she wants. Poisonous wouldn't help as much because I think for the most part her minions are still bigger than what 6-0 had available, but Divine Shield means that A, can offset the poison effect from the Myexna, but on top of that it can just offset any hit that comes at the Murlocs.
Right. Did end up floating a little bit of gold where she could have bought the second Felfin Navigator, but it really does not matter at this point. Murlocs will be able to eat any size of minion, and I think there's very little 6-0 can do. And of course, we were saying even before the Megasaur came down, she was very likely to boot Surrender. So it looks like it's going to be Simi taking a win for this lobby.
Yeah, very likely. We'll see if there's anything Zixo can do to be able to combat this. Like we said earlier, Unstable Ghoul is an option if he ends up finding that, because it can deal with the Divine Shields that the Murlocs have. But he might not have been going for it. I'm not sure if the last time he faced Simi, he saw that she did not have Divine Shields available from the Megasaurs. He can maybe guess that she might have it at this point, and maybe he'd get rid of the Mama Bear if he does find Unstable Ghoul. But this is a sort of decision 6-0 has to make if he thinks he can beat Divine Shields, and if he wants to roll for that or try to find something that can buff his board.
I think based on the knowledge he had previously, the best he could do is just try and build the board that he has to the bigger stats. So trying to triple this Goldrin, for example. There's another Mama Bear he could have picked up. Previously, when we watched him, he had frozen for a Macaw, I believe, but I think he realized that it's not worth giving up his 2 other Death Rattle minions to go for that type of build when he didn't have Baron available. So he's just probably going to end up taking that second Mama Bear there and hope that the stats will be enough to carry him. But as soon as he sees Divine Shield Poisonous, I think he'll know that there was nothing he could have done in the first place.
Yep. I think at this point, even with Unstable Ghoul, Simi's Murlocs have been working out way too much, and it's not enough for the beasts. Yeah. I think the stats are much too great. Even with... I'm actually interested to... Ooh, I didn't notice this. He tripled his Myexna. So when you triple Myexna, she gains more stats, but she doesn't gain, Mega Poisonous or anything. So he gave up 2 Poisonous minions to find the triple. And I'm curious if that was actually the right... I don't think it would have mattered anyways, but I think 2 Poisonous minions might have been a bit better here than the upgraded Myexna.
Maybe, but at this point, Simi will have no contest whatsoever. And yet again, we're going to see the Murlocs take a very, very large margin of a win. And that is just how this comp works. That's why it's drawn the ire of certain players, and why personally I prefer to play lobbies that have Murlocs banned. But hats off to Simi, because she had the 2 war leaders from the very beginning, and it takes a lot of guts to stick on that. And personally, when I go for Murlocs very early, I have a hard time identifying how all in I can go and what tempo cards I have to take and when is the right time to level to 5 to start finding Bran. And I think that was very well played towards the end.
Yeah, definitely. There is a gap between the early game Murlocs that you can pick up on Tavern Tier 2 and 3 and the important tools you need on Tavern Tier 5 and 6. So the bridge for that gap between Tavern Tier 3 and 5 or 6 can be very difficult if you don't find other minions that can help support you until you get to that point. Oftentimes you can see Murlocs kind of die out before they get to that late game position, which is when we see other comps start to shine a bit more. But she was able to make it all the way through there and win the lobby with it.
Yeah, the Bran hero power also pretty good synergy with Murlocs, because a lot of them heavily rely on battle cries and Bran the card. So when you have Bran the hero and Bran the card with the Murloc comps, it's very difficult to think of what can actually stop you. But that was the second lobby of the day, so we are all wrapped up for Battlegrounds. It just goes in the blink of an eye, doesn't it, Hacker? I feel like Battlegrounds action, we've been jumping between screen to screen really quick. Always stuff to talk about. I'm so excited for the next few days as well, but I think we're going to get the standings after the second lobby real soon.
Yep. I mean, the action is actually just incredible. I spoke to this yesterday as well. It's a lot different when you're watching a specific streamer because there does end up being a lot of downtime. But being able to see so many different player perspectives and seeing everything happening in the lobby at once seems very, very exciting. And I think it's going to lend itself to a much more exciting sort of tournament scene if we see this continuing with other events.
That's right. Getting the Bob's eye view over all of the boards is absolutely incredible. But later on, we will, of course, be seeing constructed play. And for any fans of Tice wondering why he hasn't been playing just yet, I do believe he's been assigned to the constructed roster for G2, and they will probably be playing later on today. Actually, don't listen to me just yet. I need to look at our schedule. All right, our first match for the day is T1 versus Lucky Future, and followed then by G2 versus World Elite. And so kind of have to rein it in and put on our constructed hats now, because this is also a lot to talk about, Hacker. We have a very unique format, 10 decks. If you've had a chance to go over the deck list, has there been anything that caught your eye in particular?
So the interesting thing about this is that there's going to be about 300 cards that people are submitting for each 30 times. Yes, 300 cards that people are submitting for each team, basically. So there's so many different cards to look for. We talked a little bit about this yesterday, that people are, for the most part, submitting very similar archetypes, and people end up being disagreeing on very specific classes. One that came up yesterday was Tempo Demon Hunter versus Control Demon Hunter. We do see that today Team LF did bring Control Demon Hunter, but so did T1, and this was a difference from what we had yesterday. And I believe Naya was telling me that she, and I think a lot of other players, did end up preferring Tempo Demon Hunter, but today we do have a consensus on Control Demon Hunter, which is one of the big things I wanted to look out for today, which teams wanted to go for the control route versus the more aggressive route here. And once again, we do have a split on Paladin, where one of the teams, LF, out of the first two teams we're going to be seeing today, have Libram Paladin, whereas T1 ended up bringing Murloc Paladin. And this is a split we did see yesterday as well. So it's interesting seeing people kind of explore the less common classes in a tournament format like this, whereas in other formats we end up only seeing 3 to 5, maybe 6 classes, depending on what's kind of meta and what you're trying to beat.
Yeah, it is so true, especially since yesterday we were seeing very different approaches to how you do the ban strategy. I have to say, from FCB, I did not expect at all to leave up Demon Hunter, but we'll see if there's going to be similar ideas throughout the other teams. And for anyone tuning in yesterday, you'll know that it was the Chinese teams that reigned supreme in both Battlegrounds and Constructed. No wins able to be taken for the international teams just yet. Today, for the second lobby in Battlegrounds, the international teams did take a very convincing win. We did get a brief glimpse at the point totals, and first and second were unsurprisingly G2 and T1 there. I'll be excited to see the totals, including the first lobby later on, but I'm sure T1 and G2 are looking to cement their reputation in Constructed as well. So particularly among these decks, I have to say, I'm wondering if the Shaman can get some work done, because yesterday in Constructed, we saw Bunny Hopper piloting that Evolved Shaman versus Priest, but it did end up getting this. What do you think about particular Q, or counter Q, I should say, of Shaman into Priest?
So that one's kind of interesting. I personally have tested a little bit of Totem Shaman, even though it wasn't Galakrond Shaman, against a lot of the prevalent decks in the meta, and personally I thought that Totem Shaman was a nice bit of a lineup against Priest. Galakrond Shaman seemed a little bit worse, but maybe with the cards, the specific list that Team Liquid had yesterday, they believed it was it gave them a bit more of an edge than the other available decks they had. I remember me and Naya talked a little bit about what other decks they could have queued up. I think it was Druid, the Priest Mirror, or Rogue, and perhaps they thought that those three were maybe closer to even, and they thought that even though Galakrond Shaman isn't that great against it, maybe it was, you know, a few percentage points better, which is maybe what they were trying to look for when they queued it into the Priest.
That's right. So even between the caster amongst the teams, when you have to put so many great minds together, no one's gonna immediately agree on one thing, and that just adds yet another layer of difficulty to already a very complicated format of having to bring all the classes. So we will be going into Battlegrounds a little bit soon, guys, but until then, we're gonna toss you over to the Chinese stream. Don't go any